Thanks for joining me today to talk about protecting your Atlassian investment. My name is Lisa Barton, and I am a solution architect at Cprime. I have about 22 years of business process improvement experience, and I've spent the last decade really sharing with customers how to utilize the Atlassian tool stack and also implement it in a way that saves them time and money. So let's get started. Today, we're really going to talk about just a general introduction, and then we'll do some of the basics, right? What does the cloud offer? And then we'll talk about beyond the cloud, beyond the tool and what the tool is going to offer. What are the things that you all will need to know in order to properly set up and protect your Atlassian investment? So let's get started with just talking about the basics. The good and the bad with the Atlassian ecosystem, right, is that it's highly flexible. And we all love that. We love the flexibility of the Atlassian stack to be able to utilize it and implement it in a way that is meaningful for all of our organizations. It's highly configurable. It is easy to stand up. But if we're not really careful, it can be costly and disruptive to re-architect. So planning is always key. So now let's talk about the basics. What does the Atlassian Cloud have to offer you that will support your governance journey? The Atlassian Cloud actually has made some really great strides in how they can help to manage, monitor, and automate some of your governance needs. Things like audit logs, log files, and admin insights give us tremendous information, right? And then they've also implemented backup automation and, of course, automated updates. And I will say that automated updates is one of the most talked about things that my clients really love. It prevents them from having to go through the whole process of planning for and implementing an actual update. Instead, Atlassian is constantly keeping them updated with all of the latest and greatest, right? And so clients really, really love that. And it seems to be a cost and time savings to them. Atlassian also has great project archiving capabilities in the cloud that a lot of my clients will utilize that capability so that we never want to delete information, right? But we want to be able to archive it so that we can free up some space. And so a lot of our clients really love project archiving because it allows you to maintain the historical data. You're not getting rid of it. If you ever needed to go back to it, if there was ever an audit of that information, you have it, but it allows you to archive it so that you're able to free up some space. And the other really great thing about the Atlassian Cloud is that it's fully customizable. You have the ability to fully customize your access controls for things like SOCs, right? That most of us are concerned with when we're in the technology space. You are easily able to customize your access controls in the cloud. So now beyond the basics, right? There are plenty of things that the Atlassian Cloud will help enable us to do, but what do you need to be able to do in order to support governance in the cloud? Beyond the basics, the big thing that I really want to share with you all is that most companies spend a considerable amount of resources on things like cybersecurity and disaster recovery initiatives, right? We're always thinking about what happens if someone were to attack our systems or if the systems were to go down. But I will tell you where I see almost all organizations fall short is they fail to protect their Atlassian investment and their Atlassian ecosystem from within, right? It's protecting your framework, it's protecting your configurations. So I would like to share with you all and challenge you all to think about not just cybersecurity and not just disaster recovery, but governance as a huge key piece to protecting your Atlassian ecosystem. It really is about how do we protect our system from ourselves and keep continuity of the system, and with the ever-changing dynamics of an organization, right? Whether that be people coming and going, new employees coming on board, folks that are leaving, whether that be that the ownership or responsibility of a tool is changing hands from one area of an organization to another, whatever that may be, we always want to make sure that we have done adequate planning around protecting our ecosystem and our configurations, because ultimately it's protecting our Atlassian ecosystem. The good is that the ecosystem with Atlassian is highly flexible, right? Which means I can really create and do anything that I want in the tool. The bad side to that is if I'm not careful, so can all my peers, right? And so today I may have a very stringent process in place for how I manage the Atlassian ecosystem. But if I don't document that somewhere, then when I leave the company, there is no one that carries that torch and has that continuity to continue protecting the ecosystem. And in fact, because of how just configurable the Atlassian ecosystem is, I may have architected it and set it up and been managing it one way. And if I don't pass that information on, then the person who I pass the torch to doesn't know how I was necessarily managing the system and how I architected it. And so they may inadvertently start to use it in a different way, manage it and architect it in a different way that then leaves us vulnerable internally. So what do you need to do, right, to support your Atlassian ecosystem in the cloud? This all comes down to strategic planning, governance, continuity, and protecting your investment, change management, and compliance. And those are the real things that we're about to focus on here today. So all of the other stuff, of course, you can look up on the internet and get tons of information on, what does the cloud offer you? But I really want to spend a few moments today giving you those nuggets of information from someone who goes into clients and cleans these things up all the time to really share with you how you can save a lot of time and money and protect your data integrity, protect your system, and all of those things if you keep these 4 things in mind: strategic planning, governance, continuity, and protecting your investment, change management, and of course, compliance. So let's start by talking about strategic planning. The key here is that a little bit of planning goes a long way. I recently did a talk and had someone ask me, well, doesn't that lend itself more toward the waterfall method of implementation of a tool that is supposed to be an agile tool? And I would challenge you that if we are to say that we are agile, does not negate our responsibility to properly plan, right? And that's what strategic planning is all about. It's all about thinking about the things that we may not be just instantly inclined to think about as we're rolling it out, right? And as we're rolling it out, all we're thinking about is our own need. But strategic planning is really about thinking about the interconnectivity, the complexities, the relationships that we may not be thinking about. It's really doing a little bit of planning to save us so much headache down the road. And I will tell you that this is the one area that if missed, most of our clients not only spend 4 times as much time and money down the road cleaning it up, and at a minimum, I should say 4 times as much time and money, but they also then don't get the quality of data integrity that they once hoped that they would get out of the tools. And it can, in fact, unintentionally silo organizations if we don't plan well. So it is certainly something that I really want to stress is really important for any organization, no matter how big or how small you are, no matter where you're rolling it out from, you want to really do some strategic planning so that you don't find yourself in a position down the road where this tool that was supposed to make us more agile and was supposed to help us has, in fact, unintentionally siloed us as an organization. So the key things here to think about is that the tool may be simple to use, but it is very simple to use. And it can be, in fact, very simple to implement, but you want to be very purposeful, very thoughtful, and very meaningful in how you architect things, because it will impact you down the road. And you want to be thinking about that, right? You'll see that bullet number 4 here is all about scalability and data architecture. And that is one of the things that we really, really want to think about when we're talking about planning our rollout of a tool, regardless of how large or small that rollout is. Take the time to think about your architecture. It is really important. And I don't mean just architecture in the tool, right? I mean, you want to take the time to think about what is our operational architecture, right? What is our organizational hierarchy or our organizational architecture? And those 2 things may not be one and the same, right? Your operational architecture and your organizational architecture may be vastly different, but you want to take the time to think about those things when you're planning this out, because more likely than not, at some point in time, especially if this thing gets going and catches fire in your organization, which it does in almost every organization I've ever been a part of, that's exactly how it gets rolled out to the masses, is that someone starts to use it and a team starts going and everyone hears about this great tool and this great tool stack and everyone wants to use it. And that's beyond our technology teams, right? I've implemented this at Fortune 100 banks that use it even in their financial realms and in their audit and governance realms. So there's so many uses for this beyond just technology. And you want to think about that because it does impact your data architecture, right? You want the ability to not only get data and data roll up for the purposes of organizational hierarchy, right? Things like leadership need to be able to get information and get data. And man, wouldn't it be great if they could just push a button and get on-demand, real-time, reliable, quality data? And so you do want that capability, right? But the other thing is operationally, we want to architect it in a way that if our operational architecture in this within our organization is different than our organizational hierarchy and organizational architecture, that we're still able to seamlessly get information and data. So we're able to get a cross-cut of data and how things are being done, right? How work is happening across an organization. But we also want the ability to get roll up and drill down data so that we can get information for things like organizational reporting. And so it's things like that that you really want to think about. You want to also think about information protection and access management. These are huge keys, especially when we're talking about SOX. But this information protection and access management really is, what is your access management strategy? And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I see here is that there's this strategy of, oh, we've got some QA folks and some dev folks, and we've got a few business owners, and that is the access management strategy that is used. And it's not a sustainable, scalable access management strategy. And there is, I will share with you that there is a gradient, right? There is an area of over architecting access management and under architecting access management. You want to be somewhere in the middle, because both extremes of that really open you up to unnecessary risk, right? And at the end of the day, we're all trying to reduce our risk. No matter what area of a company we're in, we all want to reduce our risk. If you over architect access management, it makes it really difficult to manage and to maintain, thereby actually increasing your risk. And the opposite is true. If you under architect your access management and folks just have access to all kinds of things, it doesn't protect your system and your information. Of course, we want to always think about scalability and data architecture. It should be the front and center of all of our strategic planning that we do when we're rolling out these tools. Because if we don't build to support that data architecture and that scalability, it is really expensive and really challenging to try to make that transition. And many of our clients actually have to end up going with a net new instance that they then architect well and move things into. If you can avoid that at all costs, right? We want to save ourselves time and money, and thinking about scalability and data architecture is probably the single most important thing I can share with you for you to walk away with. If you want to save yourself time and money and you want to have good data quality, scalability and data architecture are just critical. If all else fails, get an expert to help you, right? There are folks just like me out there that have rolled these tools out and cleaned these tools up at, hundreds of different companies. And so we're able to really help you with asking the right questions, right? And giving you alternatives to how you might look at something, right? If you have a question about, we have a need and we're thinking that we want to go this way, but we aren't sure if there's a better way to do it, or are there any issues with us going that way, you can always look out, or look to an expert in the industry, such as myself, and there's many others like me that really do a lot of cleanup. And that's really who I will share with you that you want to go to, right? You really want to find someone that's done a lot of cleanup, because we're all human and you don't know what you don't know. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a genius. I've had a lot of experience cleaning things up. So because of that, I'm able to share with folks the do's and the don'ts, right? What I've seen, what I've solved, what I've fixed, and the things that we just want to steer clear of because of the problems that they cause down the line. And I can't share enough how a lack of proper planning will cost you on average 4 times the money and 4 times the time. And I recently talked about this as well. I had a small company that they did not want to do any planning. It took them a year to roll out versus another company that I had that was a very large company, over 5,000 users that we onboarded in 21 weeks. So planning goes a long way. It really, really helps. So best practices, I really hit on this already, but 3 key things to remember. Balance customization with cost. It's one of the biggest challenges that I see organizations face. They over customize and it ends up getting them in trouble. Minimize customization. There is this apex, right, of where cost and customization meet and where it's most efficient. And anything beyond that, you're really spending so much money just to manage the system and to maintain the system that it's just not worth the over customization. So really balance customization with cost. It's all about strategic architectural planning, standardization, and simplicity. Now let's talk about governance. How do we protect your system from within? More often than not, all of your risks are going to come from within. I'll be very, very honest with you. The number of attacks that you're going to have on your JIRA system, natural disasters that take down the infrastructure, those kinds of things are going to be so few and far between, right? We will protect ourselves from that event that may one day happen, right? Oh my goodness, what happens if all the servers catch on fire, right? We do plan for those kinds of things, but I will tell you that more daily attacks to your system will come from within. And the governance framework and your governance framework really needs to include protecting your investment from yourselves. And that means your own admin, right? Even when I'm working with a client and I'm standing someone up net new, and I have a team of folks that are helping me to implement these tools, I protect the system against all of us as well. We're constantly in sync so that my architecture doesn't differ from somebody else's architecture, where we're now putting 2 totally different architectures in the system and have made a complete mess out of it, right? So it's not even just a matter of, do I know how to be a JIRA admin? There's so much more that goes into this. It's so much more beyond just, have I gotten some training? Do I know how to set the tool up? We want to think long beyond that, right? It's about policies. It's about standards. It's about your governance committee, process, procedures, continuity, training programs, and enablement. It's about all of these things that should make up your governance framework. And what I will say to you is that one of the things that I see done, or I should say not done, right? Done the least or not done at all, is policies and standards. Folks look at this as if it's just a little tool that's helping, move some cards on a board, and maybe it connects to our development and those kinds of things. It's just a storage repository for information. And they don't take the time to put policies and standards around the actual ecosystem itself. And I cannot tell you how important this is. Everything from, if you think about it, how we onboard somebody, right? What groups do they go in? What is our access permissions strategy, right? I might come from another company and you've just hired me as your admin, and I came from somewhere else and they were doing it differently. And guess what I'm going to do in your system if there are no policies and no standards for me to reference, right? I'm going to actually start doing access in your system the same way that I did it where I came from. And your architecture may be different, and now I've compromised your system, right? Policies and standards are so critical. How do we onboard people? How do we onboard projects? What do our templates look like? All of these different things. How do we manage change, right? All of those things are so critical when we're talking about governance and protecting your investment in the Atlassian ecosystem. I will tell you that it literally takes months to see your Atlassian ecosystem go out of control if you're not careful. And that's months. It's not years, right? It's not, over the course of 4 or 5 years, you'll start to lose control. You can literally lose control of your system in a matter of months if you don't have the proper policies and standards and continuity and those kinds of things in place. So it's really, really important. The other thing that I always share with folks is a governance committee. You want to bring in a governance committee, and it's for 2 things. Number one, you're going to need someone who's going to own some of this stuff, right? And those folks should help to own it. The other thing, though, that is really important with a governance committee is the decisioning process. So while we may be thinking about what kinds of changes do we want to make, right? We might be thinking about those kinds of big, and it doesn't even have to be a big change. I will say it can be a small change, right? What is going to be our organizational policy or process on story points? It makes a difference, right? If one area of the company is doing it vastly different than another area of the company, it makes a difference. And while my team may just say, well, we have decided that we just call it one story point equals a day, right? Another area of the company who has all these agile coaches and who is, really well understands the agility process, they may say, no, that's really bad. We should be using something like Fibonacci or something like that, right? But if you start to do things vastly differently within your system, then there's no way for you to get quality data out of the system, right? And so one of the things that your governance committee will do is start to provide some guidance on those things. So when I go to write the training material that says one story point equals 1 day's worth of work, I've got somebody on that committee that says, let me raise my hand and tell you that that's not a good practice, right? And so let's have a conversation about that. And it opens me up to the knowledge that I don't have myself, which is really important in these situations. And it's beyond just that, right? It is really, truly, what are the impacts of what I want to do in the system to other areas of the company, right? And to other people in this company. And it gives us the ability to have a committee of folks that can raise their hand and say, oh, but if you do that, it's actually going to negatively impact my organization. So we can have dialogue about it versus there being a sweeping change or something, or everyone's doing it different, right? You want to have some guidance, and you want the guidance that's coming to not be from a single team, because that single team may do things very differently than another area of the company. And you want everyone to come together to be able to say, here's what we think is best for us as a whole. Process, procedures, and continuity. I can't stress that enough. As I shared with you about policies and standards, the same is true here. Processes, procedures, and continuity. And this really takes us into the training programs and enablement, right? You will hire folks that will come from an external organization that has already been using a tool stack, the Atlassian tool stack, whatever that combination of tools may be. And if you don't give them the proper training and enablement, they will utilize the tool in your organization the way that they used it somewhere else. And it may be vastly different, right? And let me give you a really, really good quick example here. Let's say the organization that I came from didn't use Fibonacci. We estimated everything as one story point equals 1 day. And so I would have epics that might have 100 as their story point value. And I would put that in. That's just how we did things at my company. We didn't have any guidance, and that was just the way we chose to do it. And I come to your company and I don't get any enablement. And now I'm story pointing my epics with 100 story points on them. How does that impact your reporting if your organization does things different? Maybe your organization doesn't story point epics at all. Maybe it's a roll up. And now I've just added in 100 story points somewhere that now as we're doing any sort of mapping and we're doing any sort of reporting, I've just skewed all of that data and no one has any idea where that's coming from without drilling into it, right? So training programs, training enablement, getting folks that are leads that are embedded with these various different teams and organizations that can help share information and share process and share procedures and things like that is just critical. There's always this need for everyone to kind of operate in their own way, and everyone should be able to do their own thing. And while the Atlassian ecosystem and the tool stacks certainly support that, what you want to always be conscientious of is if you want any sort of on-demand data, right, that is reliable, that you can trust in the metrics that you're getting, and you don't want to have to employ someone to go in and create PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets and to try to make sense of all the data and try to, aggregate data. If you want the tool to be able to help you do that yourself with road mapping and those kinds of things, then it is really important that there is at least a vein that runs through your organization of commonality. The teams are free, right, to operate in ways that are meaningful for that team. But there should be a common vein that runs through the organization that are just some of our standards, right? Just like with anything else, you would want that here with the Atlassian stack as well. So a few quick things on change management. Change management is critical to protecting your investment. If without it, you will end up with changes being made to the system that now take this beautifully architected ecosystem that you spent all this time to implement. And if you are not careful, a few months down the road, a bunch of changes and enhancements that have come in and you've lost control of it, right? You've made changes that are impacting folks that you had no idea it was impacting. You now no longer have real-time data quality that you can rely on. There's now a possibility that that data is actually false and or is misleading, right? Because we haven't maintained certain agreements and things like that. I've added tons of custom fields. I didn't know that custom fields should go through a committee or that there should be some governance around them. And now my system is super slow because I've done all these things, right? Or I'm renaming things and had no idea that reports were built from those particular custom fields and things like that. Your change management process is really, really, I cannot express this enough. It is critical to protecting your investment. You want things like a formal intake process, documentation. You want decisions and versus recommendations. You want communication. All of those kinds of things are just critical, right? If I don't have a formal intake process, then who's making changes? Is anybody like vetting these changes? Are we documenting these changes? Are we communicating these changes? Are we road mapping these changes? Like, what is happening here, right? We want a formal intake process. We also want to document, right? It passes that continuity down so that the next person that takes my job knows, here are the decisions that we made. Here's why we made those decisions, when we rolled them out, what the potential impacts were. Here's the material that we shared with folks when we communicated these changes out. And those things are valuable even internally, right? If I am a part of the training arm of our organization, I'm going to consume that and I'm going to now input that into our training material so that anyone that joins the company or does their annual refresh now knows about these changes to the system, right? It's about decisions and versus recommendations, right? Not that this committee is necessarily going to be the committee that has the rubber stamp that says go or no go, but it is really all about making recommendations and having the right folks at the table to raise their hand and say, is there a better way to do this? Because the impact to my organization, if you make that change, is substantial, right? It is having that conversation that is so important. And then, of course, communication. It does absolutely no good if we make the decision that we're going to enable story points and that everyone should be using the Fibonacci scale if I never communicate that out to anyone. And now in story points, some people are putting their hours that they worked. And now I'm relying on that data is actually for story points when no, it's not. People are just using it for whatever they really want to because there was no communication. There was no guidance. So those kinds of things you also want to be mindful of. All right, so in closing, let's talk really quickly about best practices. So just a couple key considerations, right? One is simplify, simplify, simplify. It is always easier to enhance the product more as time goes, and everyone will enhance the product, right? You'll continue to iteratively make improvements, and that's fine. But it is certainly easier to enhance and to continue to iteratively make improvements to the product than it is to ever go back. Once you have over-architected a product, it is really, really challenging, if not impossible, once folks have started using it to actually dial it back in. So simplify, simplify, simplify. Second is if you want quality, reliable, on-demand reporting, you must streamline. There is a common vein that needs to run through the organization. If you want the ability to be able to roadmap at every level, team level, department or train level, your program level or your line of business level, or your portfolio levels, if you want the ability to be able to get quality reporting, roll up, drill down reporting, road mapping, and all of those things to actually be reliable, right? You do have to have a thin vein that runs through the organization that is built around that. Otherwise, you do lose that capability to have quality and reliable on-demand reporting. The other thing is strategic planning. It's going to save you time, money, and headache. I cannot stress this enough. This is where we see our clients really spend a tremendous amount of money. They didn't want to take the time and the money to invest in discovery and planning up front, right? And really uncovering what are the requirements and really planning through this and thinking strategically through this. And if you don't take that time up front, you're going to do it at some point. It is likely going to be 4 or more times as costly, both time and money, in the end. So be sure that you strategically plan because it's going to save you time, money, and a whole lot of headache in the end. And finally, training. Training on how to use the tool at your specific organization is absolutely critical. I can't stress that enough. We spend a lot of time onboarding and ramping up as we roll out a new tool. But then after that, it becomes a telephone game of passing on information and how we use it, and there's no formalized training. And it's a really big mistake, right? We will hire folks that come from other organizations, and if we don't provide them adequate training, they're going to use the tool here the same way they used it somewhere else. So it's really critical that we train on how you use the tool for your specific organization. And you want to do that to make sure that, again, you can get that quality and reliable data. Thank you for joining me today, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions. Thank you.